Hi, I'm Fred Kowal, President of United University Professions, and I'm speaking to you today, Earth Day, the 50th Earth Day in our world's history. Although that sounds kind of strange, because I know it's a cliche, but in fact every day is Earth Day because this is our home. This is our only home. And specifically, I am speaking to you from my cabin, actually the porch of my cabin in the northern Catskills, Schoharie County. Right down there is Cobleskill Creek that runs through a valley where there is the Cobleskill College, where I've taught for 28 years. And yeah, it's home, and it's a beautiful place to live. But over the past 30 years, I've lived in this cabin for over 30 years, I've seen the world around me change. The wildlife patterns change. The weather patterns change. And it's climate crisis in stark relief. At the same time, this is an incredibly unusual time period in our world's history. This is the 50th Earth Day, and we're supposed to be celebrating that. But there's something else that's happening, and we all know it. The coronavirus epidemic, pandemic, that threatens all of the world. Unfortunately, for many, this crisis has overshadowed the climate crisis and Earth Day. There was an article in the New York Times this morning that said why no one is paying attention to Earth Day this year. That was the headline, or words to that effect. That's a really serious mistake, because in fact, the coronavirus pandemic, the climate crisis, are two symptoms of the same challenge, the same problem that we face. At heart, what we are dealing with are manifestations of environmental injustice. That's what we're seeing. And the root of that environmental injustice is the way that so-called Western civilization, throughout its history, but especially during this industrial age and what some call the post-industrial age, has been the way that we have been living our lives as countries, as nations, as societies, as people, as individuals. Because everything we have done in this industrialized society and world is we have exploited the earth completely for the pursuit of profits and also for the pursuit of a more comfortable lifestyle. The increase in population, which has more than doubled since the first Earth Day. The rate of the extinction of species has accelerated as well. The loss of wild lands has accelerated. And with that, the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere has grown, creating the climate crisis that is causing the deaths of thousands and thousands of people every year. Over 100,000 die each year just in the United States because of illnesses caused by the overuse of coal, natural gas, and oil in its burning, in its use, that leads to lung disease, heart disease, asthma, and with those conditions, the loss of life. Now, the coronavirus is right here in front of us. I'm working from home, and it is because we are sheltering in place. Social distancing, physical distancing, however you want to call it. And thousands are dying every day because of this disease. Why do I say the two are linked? We know statistically that the rates of mortality to the coronavirus are highest in those cities, in those areas of our country and our world where air pollution is the worst. The two are linked. More than that, it is clear that the coronavirus is simply the latest disease that has made the jump from other animals to human beings. And it's because we are encroaching more and more into the areas where those animals inhabit. It's happened throughout human history. There have been countless plagues throughout human history. It's the nature of our interdependent relationship with the natural world. The challenge we face now is because the population is growing so fast, because the need for food, the need for land, the need for resources to extract from the earth, for our economic growth, if you want to call it that, for our continuation of our lifestyle. It's not sustainable, but we do want to maintain it. As we continue to do that, we will continue to be exposed to these viruses. They will keep making the jump. The coronavirus is not unusual. It's just the latest, and more will come. And as they do, we must be prepared to face the consequences. Ocean levels are rising. Ice packs are shrinking. Species are going extinct. The land is changing. Historically huge fires ravaged California and Australia in the last year. Not many of us are talking about those catastrophes anymore, but they happened so recently. I can't help but think that we suffer from a basic societal flaw. I'm going to go back to the people who used to live around here, and a lot of them still do. That is the Mohawk people. They were one of the 6 nations of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Iroquois Confederacy. You know, the leaders in that 6-nation confederacy, they had a rule, and that is that every decision had to be made after considering the impact of that decision 7 generations in the future. 7 generations, that's roughly 150 years. How many times do you think the leaders of this nation, this state, this community have made a decision considering the impact 150 years in the future? Not very often. Perhaps in the creation of some of our environmental laws. And since that first Earth Day, we've had success. And if you go back further, historically, there have been success stories. And it hasn't been linked to political party. The first national park created, Yellowstone, was created by a Republican president, Ulysses S. Grant. The great expansion of federal lands, the first great expansion, undertaken, of course, by Teddy Roosevelt, expanded further by Franklin Roosevelt. And then his successor, Harry Truman, created Everglades National Park, not because it was a distinct and uniquely beautiful setting, although I think it is. It was created as a national park because it was a unique ecosystem. That was a first. And then you go to President Kennedy, who created the first national seashore at Cape Cod and expanded parklands in his short tenure as president. And then there was Lyndon Johnson, who passed or put into law, signed into law, the incredibly historic Wilderness Act. And following that, believe it or not, in the tenure of Richard Nixon, we got the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, the creation of the Environmental Protection Agency. And some presidents since then have grown our protected lands. Of course, President Obama, first among presidents to aggressively embrace the idea of a multinational approach to dealing with the climate crisis. But here we are now. In 3 short years, massive wholesale retreats from that entire history of preservation of our environment. And let us remember where I started. Environmental degradation hits the poorest most of all. It hurts communities of color worst of all. COVID strikes in the same communities. What we are facing on this particular Earth Day is a realization, I hope, that we must deal with the 2 symptoms of the one problem: environmental injustice throughout our world. Where the resources are extracted is in the poorest nations, or in the poorest nations of this country, and thereby impacting the health and well-being of the people who live there. Almost exclusively, communities that are poor, rural, and communities of color. Native nations in the United States have been subjected to the worst impacts of the COVID virus, while at the same time, the causes for that is because of being subject, as in the case of the Dene people, Navajo people in Arizona, where high rates of cancer, diabetes, lung disease, the result of uranium mining and coal mining, has now brought about the catastrophic loss of life with COVID. Environmental justice is about protecting those communities that are the most impacted by the twin scourges of the climate crisis. And that's involved in environmental exploitation of the worst kind and the coronavirus. Now, what's the way to deal with this? There are a lot of proposals that have been raised over the last 50 years, some more realistic than others, some more productive than others. But there is one certainty. We have to come to terms with the way we manipulate, use, and exploit our natural world, because it has real effects on our lives, whether it's a virus or whether it's in the destruction of lives through long-term illness. This is the time to expand opportunity. It's not a time to cut back on opportunity. Increased opportunity, higher educated population will bring about solutions to the challenges we face. A more equitable society, a society that does not have itself ravaged by viruses or the devastating impacts of the climate crisis. And justice will flower. Environmental justice will come about for everyone, especially in those communities where so much suffering has taken place. Back before I moved to New York, I used to live in Montana on the Flathead Nation. It's where the Salish, Kootenai, and Pend Oreille tribal nations live and have lived for generations and generations, thousands of years. And in their creation story, Coyote comes among the people to make the earth prepared for life. But Coyote, being Coyote, brings both good and evil into the world. And it is up to us humans, pitiful humans, to adapt to those realities and live in balance with the earth. That is what we must pursue. And that balance can only be achieved through an educated, motivated, and wise population. Let's build the State University of New York. Let's build a just world. Let us protect the environment for our children and their children and their children. 7 generations into the future. That is our task today and every day. Because every day is our Earth's day. And we are part of this Earth. Thank you. And stay well and stay safe.